TICUU'S Divination, an exotic bow that came out during Season of the Chosen. When it first came out, a lot of people used it, said this was cool, and threw it in their vault, and it's been in there ever since. But with Season of the Lost, you know, a lot of our OG go-to weapons that, you know, we never took out of our loadout, like Anarchy and stuff. With those being nerfed, I wanted to, you know, go and try out and find different exotics that might be, you know, useful this season. And with Overload bows, I went and tried out all the exotic bows and found that TICUU'S Divination is actually low-key a sleeper meta weapon. After my discovery of TICUU's actually being, you know, somewhat really good, I decided to make a build on it to see, like, if I truly put everything I had into making TICUU's as deadly as I can, how deadly would it become? And this thing is actually insane in terms of ad clear and DPS. Yes, DPS. Now, I know I don't normally do build videos on this channel. Like, this is actually my first video I have on the channel introducing a PvE build. I might start doing them in the future, so if you like what you see, let me know down below. But yeah, this build, first off, just for everyone who wants to see it, just so they know if they want to spend their time watching the rest of the video or not, I'll just show and give like a brief overview of the whole build before I actually go into the whole number and statistics part of this build. Yeah, so this is it. This build is definitely going to be the best on Hunter. Subclass, you're going to use Blade Barrage. In terms of your primary / kinetic weapon, you're going to use something like, I personally love a Slug Shotgun, with, for me, being Heritage, but an Ignition Code or something goes perfectly with this as well. Of course, the TICUU's, and for this build to work, you do need the Catalyst. I'll explain why later on. For heavy, as long as it's a solar heavy that does a lot of damage, so in the gameplay you're going to see, I use Ascendancy just because it's probably one of the easiest solar guns or like heavies for people to get nowadays, since you literally just have to play playlists to get it. Another great option is Hezen's Vengeance, especially if you have a god roll, and then Corsair's Wraith is actually really good as well because it pairs up with the new particle deconstruction mod. Now, this is the part where people kind of get confused and are like, yo, why are you using Oathkeepers? Those things suck. Once again, I'll explain later on, but if you look at the exotic perk, it may not sound helpful, but this thing actually helps the Catalyst out like insane amount. Like, you basically need these for the Catalyst to reach its full potential. In terms of mods, now the mods are where this build gets really fun. Is it's all going to be Elemental Well related stuff. So we got Melee Well Maker, Font of Might, Well of Life, Font of Wisdom, and Explosive Well Maker. So there's the whole build in itself, but now let's break it down and explain why I use what I use, and basically explain how this makes TICUU'S Divination arguably one of the best exotics in the game. As you can see, I started using this build maybe a week into the season, and I'm already at 4,400 kills. And I honestly, I never touched this thing until I started this build. I was just like everyone else. When Season of the Chosen came out, I tried it out for like a PvP game, and then it's been sitting in the vault ever since. All right, so first things first, in order to understand how this build works, you need to understand how TICUU's work. So the exotic perk, Sacred Flame. Hip firing this weapon fires multiple tracking projectiles. Targets marked by these projectiles explode upon death or when struck by another Sacred Flame's explosion. Causality arrows. Arrows fired while aiming down sights cause Sacred Flames to instantly detonate. Precision hits with perfectly drawn arrows increase the power of this detonation. Now, I know that's a lot of words and might seem a bit confusing, but trust me, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you actually get your hands on this thing and use it. In the gameplay, you can see what the exotic perks basically do is whenever you hip fire it, it picks 3 targets and marks like an auto aim box on them. As soon as you let go, like the bow, the arrows, all the arrows will track towards those targets. And the tracking is insane. I'm talking about like Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy type of tracking. So once you hit the people with the hip fire, this is where TICUU's actually becomes insanely good, is if you hit them with a regular bow shot, that person then explodes, which is exactly why this thing is great for ad clear, because you just mark a bunch of enemies and then you shoot, and as long as you shoot one with the regular bow shot, one will explode, causing the other ones to die, and then since those ones are marked, when they die, they'll explode as well. So it's just it's insane. It's basically a sunshot with like infinite range almost. But where the real king comes in, the real thing that makes this good for ad clear and DPS, is the Catalyst. What the Catalyst does is perfectly drawn arrows that detonate Sacred Flames increase your base arrow damage. Striking targets unaffected by Sacred Flame instead refreshes the causality arrow's duration. So what this actually means is I went and tested it out just to give you guys a visual on a Lost Sector boss. I'm gonna play the footage now. So if you pay attention, I marked the boss with the hip fire, and then then strikes him with the sacred flames thing. As soon as I hit him with a regular bow arrow, it causes him to explode, but then you see a buff in the bottom left called causality arrows. What this does is the next time I shoot someone, it causes my base arrow to do around 20% more damage. This goes all the way up to 6 times, but maxes out at 100% total damage. So as you can see in the gameplay, my base arrow does 8,000 damage, but by the time I'm at times 6, it goes all the way up to 16,000 damage, which is, if you're laying into a boss, just hitting crits over crits over crits with this buff, you're doing major damage with just your primary. That's not talking about secondaries or heavy or anything, just your primary bow. You're doing a lot of damage. With the catalyst being as good as it is, that's where Oathkeepers come into play. Now, if you read the Oathkeepers exotic perk called Adamantium Brace, bow's charges can be held indefinitely. That kind of sounds whack and pointless, but it actually works really, really well with TICUU'S. So in order to activate the catalyst, you have to have perfectly drawn arrows, which means as soon as you pull the bow all the way back, you have to shoot it right away for it to be perfect. The way you can actually tell if it's going to be perfect or not, because if you hold the bow in, eventually the bow will start to shake. And the second it starts shaking, you're not going to be able to get that catalyst buff. Where the Oathkeepers come in is that when you hold it back, the bow doesn't start to shake ever. So you basically have a permanent window to proc that buff. It's not actually permanent. I think it's like a 20 to 30 second window compared to like maybe the 2 seconds you had before. Okay, well, now that we have TICUU'S out of the way and basically how to permanently maximize TICUU'S just with the gun and your exotic armor alone, let's start getting into these mods. These mods are what make the build outside of TICUU'S insanely good. So as I said before, it is an elemental well build. So I want to start with melee well maker and explosive well maker. These are the 2 mods that are going to allow us to spawn these elemental wells. First one is melee well maker. What this does is whenever you get a powered melee kill, it basically spawns a elemental well matching the same element as your subclass. The other way we want to create elemental wells is by using explosive well maker. What this does is by rapidly defeating combatants with explosive damage, that also spawns a solar elemental well. This pairs real nice with TICUU'S because, like I said, as long as you mark an enemy and then shoot them, that's an explosion, and then it causes other people to explode. And it's just mad chaos. As long as you get, I believe it's 3 kills with 1 explosion, it'll spawn an elemental well. The reason you want to use Blade Barrage is because of the melee ability to pair with the melee well maker. Every time you get a kill with your like fan of knives, it'll spawn a well, and you can get this fan of knives easily because Blade Barrage also has another buff where as long as people are burning by your knives, it is also recharging your knife. But what you can also do is put on the Gambler's Dodge, which makes it whenever you dodge near an enemy, you get your melee back. So this way, with these 2 elemental well mods, you're basically guaranteed to get elemental wells to spawn every time. Now, why do we need these elemental wells? Well, that's because of the other 3 mods we're running. We're going to be running Font of Might, Well of Life, Font of Wisdom. Font of Might is the most important mod, or the biggest benefit we're going to get out of this build, because what it does is whenever you pick up an elemental well that matches your subclass energy type, will grant a temporary bonus to weapon damage of guns or weapons of the same elemental type. This is extremely important because TICUU'S is solar, but if you also paid attention to our melee well maker and then our explosive well maker makes it where every time you get explosive kills, it drops a solar elemental well. And then whenever you get kills with your melee well maker makes it where they drop elemental wells matching the same thing as your subclass, which is why we're running Blade Barrage, because hey, you can get easy melee kills and it's also solar. Then Font of Might, whenever you pick up wells that match your subclass, which is solar, will buff anything that also matches your subclass solar. So therefore, TICUU'S will get a buff, and then so will whatever your heavy is, which is why I said make sure you're running a solar like rocket or linear fusion. The next important mod that we get benefits from elemental wells is called Well of Life. Picking up a solar elemental well grants increased regeneration for a short period of time. I went and tested it and actually got footage showing you the exact buff. This thing is actually really nice. For all the Warlock mains out there, I believe you have an exotic arms called like Karnstein something, where if you get a melee kill, you get health back as well. This does the exact same effect. So if you actually pay attention in the gameplay that I'm playing, every time I pick up a well, I get a buff called healing for 10 seconds. And if you look at my health bar, you can see it kind of goes up permanently over and over and over again. Even when I'm taking damage, I'm constantly healing, which is why it's just insane if I can keep you know, reactivating this healing effect, I'm constantly healing myself. So the final mod that will give us our final buff that kind of completes the whole picture is called Font of Wisdom. So what this does basically, whenever I pick up an elemental well that matches my subclass type, which should be all solar, that will then temporarily increase my intellect. So what this does is, if you see in the gameplay in the bottom left, I'll have a 30-second timer. During that 30-second timer, my intellect automatically, no matter what my intellect stat is on my gear, it automatically gets set to 100. Now you may think, oh, I mean, whatever, I'd rather just use a different mod there, but set my stats to 100, which is fair enough. I mean, you could replace this with something like the new mod that came out this season where the orbs track towards you. But the reason why I like this is because it allows you to basically make your gear stats not towards intellect. So if you look at my stats right now, I don't necessarily have the best gear in the game, but I don't spec towards recovery or intellect because I don't need it because of Well of Life and Font of Wisdom. What I actually spec towards is mobility and strength, just to make sure I always have my knives going, just so I can always get an elemental well. So now that you basically know how everything works and what it does, the only thing you're missing is basically in actual gameplay. When I'm using it in game, what is my gameplay gonna look like? Well, basically all you got to do is, as long as you're getting kills with TICUU'S, and then if like a red bar or something pushes you and you're killing them with your knife and grabbing those elemental wells, that is it. As long as you're doing that, you are constantly getting healing, constantly getting 100 intellect, and you're constantly getting a 10% damage boost no matter what you're doing. That's why I think this build is very easy, because you don't really have to go out your way to do anything. As long as you're getting kills, I guess that's literally all it takes. And it's also really good because you're getting ad clear from TICUU'S, and you're also getting DPS from TICUU'S and your 10% boosted heavy. That's why I love this build. But yeah, that's about it. If you guys have any other, you know, exotics or weapons that you think deserve more love and you want me to go out my way to make a build, please let me know. If you want to see more build kind of videos on the channel, this is my first one. It's not my normal type of content, but if you want to see more, please let me know. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it. I might let some gameplay run in the background just so you can kind of see what it looks like without me talking. But other than that, yeah, all you fine ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far, I love your face, and all of you have a great rest of your day.